Thanks for joining us on today's edition of NewsNight, where we talk to some of the major players in Nigeria's drive for growth and development. I am Ladi Akeredoluale. Now, flooding and its attendant consequences of both fatalities and displacement of residents from their homes continues to be the lot of many. More than half of the states in Nigeria have or are having to continue to endure flooding in spite of warnings by the Hydrological Service authorities in recent weeks. This brings to the fore the role of emergency management in either preventing or mitigating the circumstances that these lead to. My guest is the head of the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, Mustafa Mehaja. Engineer Mehaja, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to NewsNight.
Thank you very much.
Your agency is in the eye of the storm, if I may use that phrase, in the sense that all across the country, different types of emergencies have arisen. And some of them not the traditional natural disasters which most people associate with emergency management. How have you been coping?
Well, it is so. That is why maybe our mandate, as promulgated in the act that established NEMA, we are responsible for the disaster management of all kind that ranges around, across flood, health-related like epidemics, building collapse, and all related disasters that are available in the country. We coordinate the federal response wherever it is catastrophic. So whenever there is disaster, it's the business of NEMA to mitigate, to prepare the response, and where necessary, to rehabilitate the people.
Now, you talked about catastrophic, which presupposes that if it is not of catastrophic nature, there are other types of emergencies. Can you expatiate that?
This gives me the opportunity to expatiate structurally how we operate. Structurally, we have at national level, National Emergency Management Agency, at the state level, State Emergency Management level, and the local level, Local Emergency Management Committee. This has both horizontal and vertical relationship of respective agencies of government to operate wherever there is disasters. So in that regard, a policy was established and approved by government where the disasters are categorized into threes: the catastrophic, the major, and the minor disasters. Is the responsibility of the SEMAs and LEMCs to handle the major and the minor disasters, whereas the National Emergency Management Agency coordinates the federal response when it is declared catastrophic by the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari in this case. So that's how it is organized, that's how it is planned, that is how it is structured. So that is why I mentioned catastrophic. However, it is a fact that we have a weak link. The state management agency, state emergency management agencies are not fully established in some states. They are the weak link because of lack of funding and lack of capacity. So that is why more often than not, NEMA is sometimes even overstretched because a minor disaster in a village around Elisha or so, they will be looking for NEMA to come. This is why I said catastrophic disaster, and this is why I say there is a weak link, and that's remained the weak link. The government in several fora, particularly the chairman of the governing council in the National Economic Council meetings, in 2 occasions drew the attention of the governors to put more resources to equip the state emergency management agencies and also to give them, to provide as much capacity, to build their capacity as much as possible so that they will be up to their responsibilities.
In some states, you have a situation where there is a windstorm and maybe 20 houses have their roofs blown off. NEMA is being called into action. And people then ask the question, where is the SEMA? Where are the LEMCs? This should be something that should be within their own purview without calling on NEMA, as you have explained earlier. Now, if that is the situation, do you interface with the governors at the level of the states to impress upon them the importance of SEMA, particularly in states where you have IDP camps, where a lot of people are displaced either by natural disasters or by security challenges which require them to move? Do you interface with the governors of those states, and if so, what's their response?
Interface is what we do daily basis, weekly basis, as often as possible. We work together in wherever we are, even if it is their responsibility, or if it is a minor or major disaster. We interface with them and we work together. We are trying to sort of catalyze them to take up such a response, to give them as much capacity to understand the concept of disaster management. This is why we interface with them so often, almost all the time, to ensure that their capacity, their understanding of disaster management is built in a manner that they will be able to handle the disasters in their own respective state as efficient as possible.
2019, we keep hearing of alerts from NIMET, that's the meteorological agency, talking about warning particular areas that they are prone to flood and that flood is coming. What's NEMA doing to prepare as an agency, and then what is it doing to prepare the states that are being warned ahead of this?
Well, like I said earlier on, I want to assure Nigerians we have a very formidable structure. We have a very excellent organization. Making it to work. We have policies, very well organized policies to respond to disasters. But when it comes to the implementation in the past, this is what I understood, there was the implementation strategies are very weak, or they are not even properly done. When we came in board this government, we ensure that the policies, the mechanisms are well organized and implemented. For example, the USAID trained the NEMA and the SEMAs and other stakeholders on what we call incident management. As they've concluded the training, the first is about 6 stages. The first stage, the 2018 flood disaster occurred. We quickly activate incidents, the emergency operation centers based on the incident managers that were trained. And I must assure you, the quantum of, or rather the magnitude of the disaster of the 2018 is as much, if not more than that of 2012. Because on September 19th of 2018, similar to September 19th, 2012, we had the level of water at the major station of NISA in Lokoja, was 11.19 meters, whereas in 2012 it was 11.03. So this is to tell you that the water devastation, the flood devastation in 2018 can be equated or even said it was more than that of 2012. But because we use the facilities, the policies, the mechanisms in place perfectly well, the disaster, people didn't see as if it was up to 2012 because the loss of life was reduced by almost 40% or 50%. The level of destruction or displacement in 2012 was 7.7 million, whereas in 2018 it was a little above 2.5 million people that were affected. So when you use the perfect or close to perfect structure, when you adopt and use the facilities you have effectively and efficiently, you reduce the level of the damages, the quantum of the disaster, the magnitude of the effect of the disaster will be reduced. And this is what we did in 2018, and it yields results. And we are so prepared today that we believe, we don't hope it happen, but if it happen, we will do better than 2012. The same emergency incidents management systems training that was carried out to a group of people, we increased the number. We have 2 groups now of five teams, and they are more equipped, more trained, and they will handle the situation if it happens again better than we did in 2018. So we would like to assure Nigerians, NEMA and the SEMAs are better prepared today than it was before. And we believe we can handle and we can do as better this time around than previous years.
Now, at the start of the interview, I did mention the fact that you are being saddled with tasks that people on the outside would not traditionally look at as pure emergency management issues, like the fallout of the insurgency in the Northeast. People are displaced and they have to move into internally displaced people camps, and then NEMA is saddled with the task of looking after them, both in terms of sustenance, in terms of health, and so on. How is that working out as you take, say, Borno, Yobe, to some extent, Adamawa states, which are in the front line of this insurgency? How is the situation there?
Well, first of all, I would like to clarify that all aspects of disasters, whether it is volcanoes, whether it is flood, whether it is epidemic, whether it is, they are all called technically as emergencies. And any emergency could lead to displacement of people. So it's the responsibility of NEMA to also ensure that they provide as the minimum available succor to the people. So that is why the act that established NEMA made NEMA as the national humanitarian coordinator, because we are responsible to coordinate not only the disaster response and management, and also the consequences of it, that is where displacement occur, where people need assistance. That is why where there is humanitarian crisis. So NEMA is responsible also to coordinate all the federal agencies, all the federal facilities, to ensure that such kind of problems is handled as proper as possible.
Now, having said that much, there are other agencies, some in fact foreign agencies, involved in emergency disaster management. And even though NEMA, according to the law, is supposed to take the lead and everybody else is supposed to coalesce around it, but sometimes it appears that there is friction between those agencies and NEMA, especially when it appears as if jurisdictional issues are then brought up. How are you trying to resolve that?
In reality, there is no conflict. In the case of Northeast, when the magnitude of the disaster escalated to such a magnitude that international support is required, they offered to come, the government offered it, NEMA coordinates. When it goes too extreme, there was a ministerial task force established by government. So that establishment of policy of government give NEMA a secondary response or party in the affairs. So the ministerial task force took over the coordination for 3 months, renewed for another 3 months, just like that. This is normal in operations. So it's the exigency of the situation that permits what to do at any particular time, and that's what happened in the case of Northeast. That does not really affect our operations or our role or our responsibility in any other part of the country. Today we have Northeast Development Commission. They are there to produce a master plan so that reconstruction aspect, which is part of responsibility of NEMA, will be handled by them. You see, exigency of situation determines what government policy are, so that to make it more effective, more efficient, and more dynamic.
Are you concerned for the safety of your staff? More recently, we've had situations where staff of humanitarian agencies and so on are kidnapped. They become part of the dynamics of the structure in the areas where they are supposed to be offering humanitarian, and then they get kidnapped and then killed. Are you worried about the safety of your staff in the Northeast, for example?
Worried does not explain my feelings. I'm really disturbed, and as government, we are doing all we can to protect them, to provide the necessary safety environment to do. Wherever they work, being the coordinating agency, we work with the military, we work with the police, we work with the civil defense, and all other paramilitary. We need to have moved with them. There was a gap that happened, and then in any operation, you could have gaps, you could have challenges, and this is one of them. But you could see that we are everywhere, and we operated safely. Nothing like that happened. If it happened once, it's unfortunate. It's a bad luck for some challenges or gaps that might have come as a result of operation. Operational gaps are normal in any operational situation.
Now, the Vice President, at a point in time, not too long ago, made an appeal to state governors to put more funds into their state emergency management agencies so that the pressure is reduced on the National Emergency Management Agency. You interface with them, as you said earlier in the interview. Have they responded to that appeal?
Well, I believe they do respond, but in my opinion, they need to do much more. They do respond. For example, there are incidences, you go to Lagos, they said we have already taken care of it. So there are states that are really doing very well as regard to that. And I would support my boss, that is the chairman of the governing council, the vice president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, in doing that. We will continue to do it, and I'm sure very soon or later we will get where we want to go.
Now, that brings me to NEMA itself. Now, you have, of course, as chairman of governing board, you mentioned the vice president. And some would say that gives you an inroad into the seat of power. Is funding for logistics a problem for NEMA in terms of the number of incidents it has to do?
Well, let me talk like an economist. That always is, resources are always scarce. So in that context, we just need to have judicial utilization of the little resources, and this is what we are doing. When I first came, I told the management of NEMA, and I told other staff that all leakages must be blocked, all wastages must stop. And today, we have a better operational fund. Almost most of our activities are well funded. And I must thank Mr. President, President Muhammadu Buhari. At any point in time, we need support. He is always there for Nigerians. He provided it. He will continue to provide it, I'm very sure. And then there is no much challenges as regard to that. So we have adequate availability of fund, not perfectly. It's nothing. Perfection is not human. Okay. So, but I think the situation today is much better than it used to be.
That brings me to what, again, something that we alluded to a bit earlier on, where we talked about the non-traditional, although you say that everything that creates emergencies comes under the purview of NEMA. But you have gotten involved in quite a number of things that would appear to be unorthodox, let me use that phrase. For example, the distribution of agricultural inputs, like for example, fertilizer to farmers who have been displaced from their traditional farming grounds and are now forced to start again elsewhere. And how is that working out?
Well, I must tell you that I consider that my baby project is a project I take close to my heart. Because it's a project that touched the common man, the man at the lowest level. There was massive catastrophic flooding in 2018. There was this issue of conflict in various communities in the North Central. The government graciously moved in with agricultural produce because thousands of people lost their farmlands and the produce. So it is done in such a way that inputs were given, including fertilizer, from the planting stage to cultivation stage. Professionally, we involve professionals in this. We package it in a basket method, whereby if you have a rice farm of 1 hectare, what is required from planting to cultivation. And this is what we move into all the states. We already have the database of all the affected farmers. The National Food Security Council, headed by Mr. President, approved this project. We call it Emergency Agricultural Intervention, and it is going very successfully, and the people are very, very happy. You can attest to that. I'm sure the channels goes around and see how it is going on. It is done in highly secured environment, well-structured project, and it's going on, and soon, before the end of the rainy season, people will feel the effect, the good effect of it.
Now, at some point, the program became a bit controversial because there were accusations. Of course, there were also counter-accusations of favoritism and some of the inputs being diverted and so on. And at that time, you promised to investigate. Have you done so? And if so, what did you find?
Well, on a sincere note, we have never had the case of any diversion of the agricultural produce, not a single one. However, now that you mention it, we'll go into it, but there is none, because this what is being provided. Let me just give you a snap of it. For the fertilizer, for example, it was bought from the NSIA, that is a National Sovereign Investment Fund, okay, under the presidential initiatives of fertilizer. From the factory, every 5 trucks is being guarded and protected by armed policemen, two vehicles, 2 pickup vehicles, one in the front, one in the back. Moving up to our warehouse, wherever it is, or the state is going to be delivered. At that step, there is complete security arrangement such that both all other security personnel were involved, up to the point where the last person or the final person gets these things. I cannot imagine. And all agencies in the states, African Development Program officials, State Ministry of Agriculture officials, the SEMAs, the NEMAs, the security agencies protect these items up to the last point. One other important thing you need to notice: if a farmer is given seed and herbicide, we will not give him all other inputs or materials, fertilizer and other things, until we inspect the farm. He has planted these things and it has outgrown to a level. We monitor the level when it should be, the fertilizer will be applied. I mean, in that case, I cannot imagine how and when, unless all these people will come together to agree to that, but I don't think it is possible.
And that brings me next, of course, to the next logical point. In most programs that involve a long chain from procurement to delivery and so on, there are weak links along the line, things that are beyond the agencies that are coordinating. For example, if you take transportation, NEMA doesn't own trucks, for example. It has to make arrangements for movement of things and so on. How do you ensure, given that scenario, how do you ensure then that, because these other services are not directly under your purview, how do you ensure that what you are supposed to deliver gets to the point where it is?
Well, you talk of weak points. That is exactly what it is. We thought of the same weak points that might occur within the chain. We tighten all the weak points. So far, like I said, there had never been a reported case of any diversion, because all the weak links were identified at the beginning and then taken care of, provided all necessary steps to ensure that the people don't take advantage of anything. Believe me, Today, there was not a single diversion of anything as of today.
Now, let's go to the states, where many of the emergencies happen, actual emergencies happen. We've talked about flooding, amongst other natural disasters. But then there are also other disasters that may not quite be natural. Building collapses, arson, clashes involving communities, and then you having victims and all of that. How does it work? What is NEMA's role in these other emergencies which are not quite natural?
Well, there is one thing Nigerians know, and I want to enlighten us more. There is this improper infrastructural development in all the states. That is not within the purview of NEMA, because the Urban Development Board, or whatever they have in the state, must ensure the compliance to building codes, buildings along river lines or channels are not done, to ensure proper waste management policies are properly implemented. These are snags that are not within the purview of NEMA. However, we, together with Ministry of Environment, work together to ensure that the state's Urban Development Board and the waste management, whatever they have in the states, work hard to ensure we reduce these snags as much as possible. A case of that was once brought up in the National Economic Council, whereby a structure is being developed whereby NEMA and of course federal government, the state government, and possibly the Dangote committee, PCNI, will now come together to see how we can clear channels, provide necessary assistance so that we ensure that such kind of things is reduced to the barest minimum.
Now, in other places, you have challenges that require specialized equipment. I look at the picture directly behind you and I see the NEMA helicopter. How far have you gone? Because I know that when you came in, you developed for yourself a timeline of the kind of things you would need to be able to perform this. How far have you gone along the lines of procuring the necessary equipment to be able to respond to different types of emergencies?
Well, first I must take us back to the NEMA Act. The NEMA Act gave us the mandate of coordination of government resources. All relevant agencies of government, ministries and departments are being coordinated in their response. The aircraft you see is an aircraft that was handed over to the Air Force. Like if we need any rescue mission, the Air Force can be approached under our coordination to provide necessary facility, helicopters for rescue. If it is transportation, we approach Ministry of Transportation and Aviation. All facilities available in their agencies can be now moved as government federal response in the public response mechanism to ensure. And the same thing as health. When it is health related, all the teaching hospitals, federal medical centers, wherever they are, we coordinate their deployment of personnel and resources to ensure that these things, where they need support from us, we support them with capacity building, we support them with equipment where necessary to ensure that there is proper and effective response to any disaster that might occur. So this is how the structure is made to operate.
Now, before we came on to this discussion, you were telling me something that many Nigerians do not know. When disasters happen and private resources, for example, from construction companies and so on, are seen at emergency sites, people tend to be extremely grateful to those organizations and so on. But you were saying to me that actually, under the law, those organizations don't have a choice if they are identified as having those facilities. Can you expatiate on that?
Yes, you know, in every country, every government, public interest is put first. The law that established NEMA made a provision that we can approach any company or any institution that has facility that's required at a particular emergency. And then we approach and we demand the use of that equipment. And they should oblige. And if they fail to oblige or to first to release such equipment, we are mandated by law for prosecution. This is the provision in the Act. So that's how it works. You see, structurally, mechanisms, all what you need to have to confront any form of disaster in Nigeria is there. We only need the will, the political will. We only need the cooperation of the people. We only need to ensure proper and effective implementation of these policies, rules, and laws, and there we are. Problems will be solved.
September 19, 2012, September 19, 2018, September 2019. You alluded to that a bit earlier when you said, you know, you work to make your response in 2019 even better than the response of 2018, which was in turn better than that of 2012. Specifically, because quite a number of the governors are watching you now. What is required of them at this point? Because that's around the corner.
You see, immediately we receive the alert from both NIMET and NISA. We kick off the action. We call all the stakeholders. We organize workshops for all the stakeholders. We assess their preparedness. We wrote to the governors to tell them the situation. We analyze what may likely happen, may be required, and how we should do it. Everything is being prepared. I must tell you that last year by now, I was highly tensed. But to God be the glory, I am more relaxed today, because I can understand the level of preparedness, and I believe and I pray that God in His infinite mercy will make it easy for Nigeria and Nigerians, and nothing will happen. So the preparedness is apt, the preparedness is reasonable, the preparedness is comfortable. What we have now that people get jittery is mainly rain-related flood. Rain-related flood is not as serious as river-related flood, because river-related flood, it can take off communities or even states. But rain-related, if there is torrential rain for too long because of the blockage of the drainages, because of the blockage of the canals, because of improper building across river lines, you know, so obviously moat houses just, of course, melt down, and related to disasters like that. It happens. We are responding to it as much as we can. So the situation is better today, and I maintain, and I would like Nigerians to have to be more proactive. If they observe flooding coming, they should quickly evacuate. If they observe that their life is in danger, they should move. The issue is our ancestral home. We cannot leave. I think we should be more enlightened at this in the 21st century, and make sure that we save our lives. Without the lives, we will not have anything. So this is my plea to Nigerians.
Now, there are specific examples already of where I know that not too long ago in Niger State, just a couple of days ago, as a matter of fact, in Niger State there was this rain, and then the concomitant effect of flood, and then there was need. There were a lot of people who were displaced, houses were washed away. A similar thing has happened in Kogi as well. Just to take a few examples, of course, there was that happened in Asaba a little bit earlier. I'm just wondering now, because you talked about, all what you've talked about so far now is mitigating the consequences. And there will be those who will be watching, who will be talking about preventing this from happening in the first place. You've alluded to some of it when you talked about blocked drainages and so on. Wouldn't it be cheaper for us to go after those circumstances that create the emergencies, as opposed to mitigating the consequences of the emergencies?
I must be frank with you. They are cheaper, but they are more difficult because it involves social or human mentality.
What do you mean?
Human mentality, somebody believes that it's his ancestral home he cannot leave. You have to talk to him, take time to make him understand, enlighten him. Enlightenment campaign takes some time. You could recall in the 60s and the 70s when we were young, it's not a better situation than now. Now people are more enlightened, they are more educated, it's better. So we continue to educate people, and then it takes time. So that's what I mean.
Okay, now, but when you then say that, it brings me to the question about the governance again. It goes back to the states and the local governments at which this kind of enlightenment is probably best organized. In that kind of situation, what's NEMA doing?
Synergize with them, talk to them, work with them, catalyze the situation such that they will now pick up when they are at a stable level, then we'll pull out.
Take us through a typical response process to a flood, since we've been talking a lot about flood. What's the typical response mechanism, given the fact that in many states, even the officers who are engaged for the purpose of emergency response, on many occasions do not really understand what is required? Well, what do you do when you have such a situation?
First of all, is the preparation. Like I said, we have identified areas that may, based on the flood outlook, identify areas that could be flooded. We move in together with NEMA. We enlighten the people. We identify higher place of higher ground, so that if the flood eventually come, we have the opportunity to move them. Don't forget also, I would like to tell Nigerians that there are military formations, 70 of them, that are also meant to on standby for rescue missions if it happened. The facilities are there. We can always, the president can give directives for them to move out, and then we deploy them. So one thing is, when you are in a room and it's getting flooded, the first thing is you should not bother about anything. You should move out, and you should move out not from direction of flooding, off land, so that you could save yourself. Don't think of taking anything. You should move out quickly. These are some of the techniques we enlighten the people to carry out.
Now, right here in NEMA headquarters, you have what is called the Mission Control Center. How does that work?
Well, the Mission Control Center is an electronic facility that is satellite-based surveillance system, whereby we monitor from Central Africa, West Africa, to the Atlantic on the left, to the Pacific on the right. We are part of a global system whereby we monitor such. If there is any plane crash anywhere, we can have pop up the longitude and latitude of that location, and we relay it to the first respondent, if it is aircraft, to NEMA, if it is, I mean, the first respondent will be notified, and then so that there will be evacuation activated.
Now, you also have mobile clinics now.
Yes, we call it mobile clinics, ambulance, yes.
How do those work?
Just the ambulance work are stationed in all our offices across the country where they are. In Abuja, we have 5 of them, and we call it emergency response unit, or bay, so that we assist to evacuate accident victims and things like that, yes. We also have rescue tender. Unfortunately, one of it was banned.
Yes, we saw it
used for
here.
when there is collapse building. It has all the equipment that we assist federal service, who are the first respondent in evacuating victims.
Now, one of the things that NEMA is supposed to do is that in between disasters, it's supposed to do what is referred to as contingency stockpiling. What does that mean?
Well, contingency stockpiling is relief materials keeping. and then whether food items and non-food items. So when I came, because you don't know how much food item you will buy for a particular period. Sometimes it gets spoiled and things like that. So since we are an emergency institution, we abolish keeping food items, because we observe that if it happens within 48 hours, 72 hours, we can mobilize food from wherever in emergency procurement to take food. So, but for other items, like building materials, which doesn't spoil, you can keep. That is stockpiling. It's part of strategy to make relief response or taking relief items to affected people in a manner that it could be swift and quick.
Now, as we wind this down, can I then ask you, sometimes people hinder rather than assist rescue efforts or emergency efforts. You find people standing around like an audience, watching when things happen, as opposed to either helping or moving out of the way for those who are supposed to help. Is that a typically Nigerian thing, or is it a general thing that when it comes to emergencies?
This is a situation that emanated from lack of information. In the incident response system and incident management system, you have the first cordon, second cordon, which is tactical, and the strategic third cordon. That involves security, medical, and all other related stakeholders cordoning the area. Injured people are brought into this first cordon, prepare them. If it is those that will be taken to hospital, you quickly take them. You have ambulances from health institutions to take them. But because of the practice, Nigerians always, anything that happens, they always want to see what has happened. They may not be able to help. They don't have even the capacity to help. This is part of enlightenment scheme and also training scheme that we give to SEMAs. We give also to ourselves, like the USAID incident management training that I was telling you about is part of it. So it's a wrong thing, and I want to call Nigerians, also other stakeholders, to insist on following the teachings, the trainings they acquire, so that we have a very neat, clear, and effective operation wherever an incident happens.
Let me take you outside the country. For many people, their introduction to emergency management came with the tsunami of 2004, because that had virtually worldwide implications. Since then, you had the Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan, which also had reverberations elsewhere. How does NEMA relate to its international counterparts?
We are part of international system. We attend all the international seminars, workshops, and programs. We, being part of it, wherever the need of such kind of support arises, we are party to it. There is the disaster risk reduction United Nations program on that. We are fully part of it. In Africa, we are based in the implementation of the disaster risk reduction policy, particularly Sendai framework. So we are a nation within an international corpus, and we are fully integrated in whatever is happening everywhere. That is why when the issue of notice come up, we have international organizations under the United Nations, under the European Union, under whatever guys, ECOS, that are party, or rather part of the operation in the Northeast. This is what is happening.
Now, part of the reason why I asked that is that Ebola has now been declared an international health crisis or emergency by the World Health Organization. And it's in DR Congo, but already we have information that it is moving. It's on the move into Kenya, into Uganda. What, if anything, is being done to prevent it from coming here?
This is health-related disaster. The first responder is Federal Ministry of Health and relevant agencies. We are in coordination of what they do, but for active response, they're in charge. We coordinate them. So this is what is, and you could recall the operation of Federal Ministry of Health as regard to Ebola in Nigeria was one of the best. It was excellently handled, and the capacity is there. The technical personnel who really understand what to do and what's to be done, they're there. So I don't have much problem with that.
Finally, going forward now, we're in 2019, and it does appear as if NEMA will be kept quite busy, if not on natural disasters, on other such incidences in time to come. Where do you see NEMA going, looking forward?
Well, like I said, my vision and my mission in NEMA, personal vision, is to make NEMA sound, professional, and to the level of international standard in operations. It's not an easy task, but it's a mission, and mission achievable. We are working very hard to ensure that we achieve that. So when you have a mission like that, you are happy with the structure. You only need to work in the human resources aspect. You only need to work on the issue of staff motivation and other related things. We will be there very soon. I am a professional and a fellow of Nigerian Society of Engineers and Electrical Engineers. I understand how things works. I understand how to organize things such that it will work. We'll put some little of science, technology, and engineering in our thoughts to ensure that we achieve our goals and objectives. Engineer Mehaja, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. It's my pleasure having you today. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you.